poverty and crime and bad behavior. Given the location of the hotel, right next to Skid Row, it was only natural that this would be true. But alongside the dismal stories, there are stories about hope, friendship, compassion, and love. The most common question people ask me when I tell them I worked at the Cecil for 10 years is, "Why did you stay?" One answer is Pedro, the maintenance manager, who quickly became one of my best friends. He worked at the hotel for over 35 years, and actually still works there now, even though it's no longer a hotel. It's a living complex for formerly homeless people that is currently mostly vacant. From my first day on the job, it was clear that Pedro was the one who knew more about the Cecil than anyone. He was and is the hotel's unofficial historian, and to me, he's like family. There's no way I would have lasted at the job without him. Pedro was the one who gave me my first tour of the hotel. Later, he was the first person I called when anything went wrong. He was the one who accompanied me to the roof with Elisa Lam's parents. It's now been years since we stopped working together, and he continues to be one of my closest confidants. Every month or so, I pick him up in front of what used to be the Cecil, and we have lunch together. He calls me Price, which is what my friends call me back home. My relationship with Pedro probably speaks to one of the greatest gifts I got from working at the Cecil, which was exposure to people who weren't like me at all. I grew up in an extremely sheltered environment. I didn't know anything about what it meant to be an unauthorized immigrant in this country until I spent time with the employees at the hotel. I had no idea what it was like to sacrifice in that way. I guess I held the beliefs that everyone is created equal, and that if you called the cops, they would show up really fast like they do in the movies. Many of the incidents that occurred at the Cecil were things I'd only ever seen on TV. This is probably the second answer to the question of why I stayed for so long, my own history. Sometimes I think my sheltered upbringing made me naive to the real dangers happening around me at the Cecil. It also made me curious. Who were these people who seemed so unlike me? What did they care about? How had they arrived at this place? What I want to do in this book is tell you the untold stories of all the Cecil tenants and guests who would probably otherwise remain anonymous. The title Behind the Door could be applied to every one of these people, but for me, it conjures one woman in particular, a woman who I didn't even know existed for a long time because she never left her room. Her life, and the lives of many others I encountered at the Cecil, changed my understanding of the world and of myself in it, and I am forever grateful. Honestly, if the hotel hadn't closed, I'd probably still be there right now, running through the lobby in my heels or sitting behind the enormous desk in my office, which was decorated with the opulence of a bygone era. I often make the comparison between the Cecil and the Titanic. Both were built upon grandiose visions, and both sank. Looking back, I can see that the Cecil was sinking from the moment I stepped on board. At the time, though, I had grandiose visions of my own. Maybe those visions were another reason I stayed for 10 years. I thought I could save the ship. If you know anything about the history of the Cecil, you still might not understand why I didn't quit. Most people don't. My hope is that after you read this book, you will come to see why I couldn't leave. It would have felt like abandoning a family. Chapter 1. A fun gig. In order to fully understand how foreign the landscape of downtown LA was to me, and how unprepared I was to oversee a hotel in which people were constantly dying, I need to tell you a little bit about where I'm from. I grew up in a remote town called Clarkston, Michigan, on 10 acres of land. And by remote, I mean that school was an hour by bus from our house. In many ways, it was an idyllic childhood. We picked blueberries and had horses, llamas, roosters, and peacocks roaming freely as neighbors. I spent a lot of time in nature as a kid. I used to wander around our property, collecting rocks and washing them and sometimes fashioning them into imaginary diamond rings. Once, when I was 8 or 9, I painted snail shells and tried to sell them at the end of our long driveway. These two memories are funny to think about now.